Hey y'all, what's going on? This is your man Sabir Aleem of The Wise View, and welcome. It's been a beautiful day today. I actually had to I shortened my day because I'm near exceeding my 80 hours, so I had a early day today, and I went to the gym and worked out for about an hour and a half. And you know, it's always good, man, just to keep yourself, you know, in some kind of regimen of doing something in each day. Always achieve something. You know, one of the things that I found out about me is that my life has always been so structured that I beat myself up when I don't do something in the course of the day. So I begin to redefine things, such as, you know, if I decide I want to just chill, I just redefine it as that is achieving something. I'm relaxing my mind, relaxing my body, my spirit. So that's real important for me. So, you know, today was one of those days where I wanted to wash my car. I wanted to go to Walmart and get a vacuum for the car. I wanted to do a lot of things, you know, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the gym, right? So it was good. It was near empty. I could access some of the, you know, other equipment that I wanted to access today. So, you know, that was real good for me. And then I started to go upstairs and get into bed and go to sleep. And then I realized, whoa, today is Wednesday and I have a show at 7 p.m. So thank you so much, because it's you, all of you who, you know, view this show and the other shows. It's you who keeps me, you know, grounded, man, and, you know, always focused on getting something done. So tonight's subject, right, I'm going to bypass that list of those 10 things that we must do, right, to elevate as a community in 2018, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about something else that's really going on in our society, because we keep trying to find solutions, right, to stopping the violence in the streets. We keep trying to find solutions for what's happening with our children out in the streets, and it all goes back to what's happening in the home. What's happening in the home, right? So what I did was I came up with this list of 3 things, right? 3 questions that need to be answered, right? That need to be looked at when addressing problems, because we seem to have difficulty with problem solving. Therefore, everything always ends up with a what? A smack, a punch, a stab, a shot fired. That's how children are being raised. They say or do something that the parent or the caretaker is in disagreement with. What typically happens? How is that child's behavior typically addressed? We see children fall out in the store, and the first thing comes to mind is, I will whoop his or her little ass. I wish my child would. Well, you got spanked. If you came from my era, you got beat. Extension cords, a stick, a shoe, a leather belt, whatever it was, we got beat, right? Hence the reason why they created Children and Youth Services, Department of Youth Services, the Department of Human Services, because children need to be protected. They need to be protected. And part of protecting a child, right, is protecting their spirit as well. And you're not protecting a child's spirit when you're beating them. I'm evidence of that. And I'm sure many of you could raise your hands and say, yeah, you know, I stopped doing some things, but it didn't stop me from doing everything wrong. So you can't stop a child from doing everything wrong by beating them. I've yet to see a child stop anything for life, right, as a result of a beating. They may stop it temporarily, they may sneak and do it, or when they get older they may do it. But one of the things we have to begin to look at is in community building, right? The community building begins with self. You got to get yourself in order. You got to get yourself together. You got to take a look at the behaviors that you have that trickle down into your household environment, because children learn from what we do, not from what we say. That's what they respond to. That's what they react to. That's what they're emulating in society today. What we do. So the first thing on that list is being able to identify what is your problem, not who. We haven't gotten there yet. We haven't gotten to the who yet, because the finger pointing is where part of the problem is too. Not taking responsibility, not taking ownership for one's own conduct, right? Continue to hold on to resentments. Continue to be argumentative and confrontational and defensive when something is said to you, right? But most importantly, we have to begin to look at what is the problem. So if we begin to first look at the problem being the relationship between parents. We know that in the black community that many of the households, right, are one parent driven, right? That means that it's one parent. And we know also in our society today, as far as in the black community, that most of these households, right, are led by women for a variety of reasons, right? So it's not just the mother took, you know, the child from the father. You know, it's also, you know, systematic things that happen, and family services get involved, the judicial system gets involved. There's a whole host of things that take place. So when we look at what is the problem, and especially when we look at raising a child, we have to look at the relationship between us as parents. Now, I remember back years ago when I separated, you know, from my wife at the time, and, you know, the difficulty that transpired between the two of us because of unresolved issues between us as husband and wife, right? So we hadn't even gotten the opportunity to establish ourselves as parents because we had so much unresolved as husband and wife, as a couple. So that began to play out during the course of the separation, when visitation came, right? When we had to, you know, interact with one another, you know, around the children, we were still presenting that same unresolved between the two of us. Telephone conversations that happen in the presence of children, right? That's another part of the problem. You cuss each other out in the presence of the child or in earshot of the child, right? What does the child think about all of that? And how do they deal with situations when it comes to them interacting with you and or the other parent? Because if I show as the father that it's okay to cuss out the mother, what's the likelihood of that child thinking it's okay to cuss out the mother? Especially if that child has been forced, right, to side with one of the parents because of the separation. And because they've sided with the father. So that means all the actions of the mother toward the father are being internalized by the child. And that's how the child reacts to that other parent. Because they too have resentments. Not that they've developed on their own, but because they've been conditioned by the actions, right, of the other parent. So when we look at the what in terms of, you know, raising a child, we have to look at the relationship between both parents first and foremost. And we have to fix that. We have to fix that. Right? And that's going to be a process. That's going to take some time. When you look at your own interaction between you and the child who you're raising, how do you communicate with one another? How do you talk to the child? Does the child have an opportunity to voice their opinion about things? You know, some parents have the position whereas the child doesn't have any opinion. They do what I tell them to do. Well, how healthy is that? How healthy is it when a child can't make any kind of decisions on their own? When a child has no opinion whatsoever about anything? When a child is always being told to shut up? That means I can't voice anything to you. So where do I voice my feelings to? Who do I go to? This is an action that transpires between the two of you, and every action has a reaction. So if the main person who is responsible for my upbringing, for my guidance, for my nurturing, for my direction, right, for love, for compassion, if that main person is a person who I can't go to, then how do I know who not to go to? Because you've already demonstrated you have all these responsibilities as a parent to care for me. But I get all this negativity from you. But yet, my peers out in the street, they listen. They listen. They empathize with me. Some even sympathize with me. Right? You got to follow me here, because we're just talking about the what. Because things change on both sides. The role that you have is the direction. The role that you have taken in a situation where it's a lot of conflict between you and a child is misdirection. And some of us don't want to take ownership for that. But that's part of the what. When I drive down the street in the morning, when I see kids on their way, on their way to school, I look at how they're dressed. I look at how they're dressed when they leave from this community, and how they're dressed when they get outside of this community, because I live in a gated community. Right? So some of them may very well leave out of here with the pants pulled up, with the skirts pulled down, with the shirts buttoned up. And then when they get out there and when they're amongst their peers, they try to emulate what they think the culture is amongst them and their peers. But just think for a minute. If you were to walk up on your child and see your child, now the skirt has been hiked up, because that's what they do. They hike the skirt up, they roll it up, and then they hike it up. Right? And they pin it sometimes so it don't come down, so the skirt is now shorter. Right? What do you do in that situation? How do you address that situation? When you roll up on your son and he got his pants hanging down, below his waist, and he got his drawers hanging out, how do you approach that situation? Do you humiliate and embarrass them more? Do you beat them out in the street? How do you address that? Because right now we're just talking about the what. What is the problem? Your child is dressing in that manner for a reason. What is the reason? Is it somebody else in the house who dresses like that? Does the father wear his pants like that? Do other siblings wear their clothing like that? Where is the idea coming from that I need to do this? If you're having a conversation with your child, right, you'll begin to learn some of these things. You'll never find out what the problem is as long as you keep telling the child that the child is the problem. Because as long as you can continue to tell me, even as an adult, that I'm the problem, sooner or later, what you're saying to me starts sounding like, wah, 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 wah. I don't hear anything you're saying. I automatically shut down. And that's what has happened, right, with most of our youth. Because nobody is listening in the house to them. Time is another factor. Absolutely, you have to work to take care of the family, but that's a poor excuse to use when the child wants to talk, or a child is saying to you that you're never there, and you turn around and tell the child, well, somebody in this house got to work to put food on the table, right? To keep a roof over our head. We keep running to that. That's small. That's small-mindedness, right? That's not taking responsibility. That's not taking ownership. We keep forgetting that the child didn't ask to come into this world. It was through our own decisions that these children are here. You can't abandon your responsibility. You can't pick and choose what your responsibility is going to be to the child. These are not mini-me's. These are individuals who are eventually going to grow up. They're going to come into adulthood, and they're going to be out there in the world by themselves. And right now we have a lot of children who are out there by themselves. When we start looking at the incarceration rate for girls, it's increasing. When we start looking at the abuse rates for girls in these relationships they're in, it's rising. For girls, it's rising. We're not paying attention. We're paying attention to number 45, but we're missing what's going on in our own household. We're missing everything that's going on in our own households. Right? This is the what that we have to start looking at. What is the problem? The problem is not the system. What system are you referring to as being the problem? You're referring to every system but the correct system. The problem system is the family system. That's the first system we need to start looking at. That's the first system we need to start addressing. Right? So when we look at what is the problem, we need to start there. We need to start looking around our household and see exactly how things are being run in our household. We need to get out of our complacency. Right? We need to get out of our comfort zones, and we need to start taking control in our homes with our children. We need to put all that to an end. We're not going to stop the violence out on the street until we stop the violence in our homes. We're not. And communication, right, is really one of the biggest keys to resolve. But before I go into that, let me go to number 2. Number 2 says, what caused or why did it happen? So once we begin to identify one thing at a time, what is the problem? We take that one small what. Take that one small what. Once we identify, now we got to look at what caused it. What caused this problem? And a lot of times parents just really say, I don't know. But in the moment when the behavior is being dealt with, you find all kind of reasons. You start telling the child, you're just like your mother. You're just like your father. You look just like him. You act just like him. You need to be with it. That's where you need to be. We start saying all those kind of things because we're at a loss. Because we don't know what the problem is. Because at this point what we're really doing is defending ourselves. It's our own guilt. It's our own shame. Our embarrassment. It's our own failures that we begin to look at. Failure is just learning what doesn't work. That's all it is. So that in itself is a positive. But oftentimes when our children do things and we see the things that they do, we think that we failed as a parent. No. What you have failed to do is look at what the problem is, not who the problem is. And that's the first thing we'll go to. Who is the problem? And it's not a who. What is the problem? Because children are not stupid. They have the ability to conceptualize through their own condition, at their own age, right, what's happening in situations. We're the ones who have become tainted. We're the ones who are sometimes delusional in our thinking. And the child usually brings some rational thinking into the situation, and we chew the child out for like, sounds like they got more sense than we do. That's often what happens. Think about it for a minute. If your child gives you some sensible response to something that you say to them, how do you address that? Instead of looking at the fact that this child has some sense and building on it, right? You stifle a child. You force them to withdraw. You force them to follow your directive. Therefore, they don't know how to make decisions. Therefore, they don't know what choices they have in situations because there's only one, yours. What I say. So where's the growth for the child? Where's the growth for the child? So why did it happen? There's another part. So we look at what caused it. Why did it happen? Why did my child just storm out the door? Why did my child just take the dish that they were sitting there eating off of and throw it up against the wall? Why? Because they don't have any other means of resolve. They can't talk to you. They can't tell you anything because you know everything. That's a big, big, big mistake that we make often as parents. We don't allow our child to tell us anything. Nothing. Oh, you grown now. You think you know what's best for you. Okay, well you can get the hell out of my house. And then when they leave, you're sitting there looking stupid. Because you didn't have any other means to resolve that situation yourself. And it's okay not to know how to resolve things. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to. That's why you always bounce something off of somebody else. And when you have both parents involved, instead of going against each other, and instead of, being against it's his way, you don't want it to be his way because you want to keep the battle going with him, or it's her way, I want to take control. She's always making the decisions, but maybe she's making some decisions that make sense. Maybe the decisions you're making are not good ones. Maybe you have a track record of not making good decisions. So when we look at what and the why and how these things happen, we have to begin to start looking at what role we have. Not blaming anybody. What role we have in bringing resolve to the situation. Just think for a minute. Do you curse your mother out? Do you curse your employer out? Do you curse out the woman or the man who you trying to get at? No, you bite your lip. You turn the blind eye to behaviors. You're disregarding of certain things. Right? Because that's what you want. But when it comes to the child, you think you have a different position. The child is an individual. That's another human being. That's another human being. And you always have to keep that in mind when you're talking to the child. Because a lot of times what happens is we get up in arms when the system takes control of the life of our child and our household, ultimately in many cases. Got to be monitored, got to have supervised visitation, got to report to this person, got to report to that person, all these kind of things. What was the problem for that to come about? And why did it come about? Remember? That's where we started. What is the problem? You can't continue to blame the system for taking control of your child's life when you're failing to do it yourself. One way or another, they're going to wind up in some part of a system. Wouldn't it be better to have them in a human services system that can help you and the child? And I know it's tough. I know it's tough. I remember some years ago, my stepdaughter having a problem with her son in school. He was getting involved with some boys, right? Some things were going on, and she reached out for help. And they ultimately told her, listen, until he gets locked up or something goes down, it's nothing that we can really do. Isn't that sad? Isn't it? It really is. But at the end of the day, it makes sense. Because as a parent, it is your responsibility ultimately to address that behavior. You may have some difficulty with it, but wouldn't you rather have difficulty with your child than see your child locked up, put away in some foster home, taken from you? What kind of life is that for you to live? What kind of life is that for you to live? And you really have to begin to think in that capacity. You have to. I'd rather stand before a judge and tell a judge that I had to do such and such to keep my child from going out and doing a drive-by, to keep my child from going out being involved in something that he or she didn't need to be involved in. I'd rather stand before a judge and tell a judge that than to be standing in front of a judge telling the judge, you didn't have to give my child that kind of time, you didn't have to do that to us. What? You can avoid all those things. It's going back to the what? What is the problem? What is the problem? There's evidence and research to support that when both parents are actively involved in the life of their child, children do better. Children do better. And I know some of y'all run right to the same. Well, I try to reach out to her. I try to reach out to him. And she don't never want to listen. She always want to argue. What is the problem? Why are you always arguing? What is the problem? Not who. What is the problem? The two of you don't know how to talk to each other. The two of you haven't brought to the end, right? The unresolved stuff that the two of you had when you were together. If you're still sleeping together, that ain't going to help. I can tell you that much. That ain't going to help. Ain't going to help nothing. Right? So then when you go to number 3 on the list, what can be done to solve it? Because that's what we have to begin to look at. What we can begin to do to solve the problem. Everything begins and ends with you. That doesn't make you the problem. But you can be the solution. Right? You have to disconnect those buttons that are so easily pushed, that cause the dissension, that cause the conflict and confrontation. You have to learn how to talk to one another. Now that's just with the parents. That's just with the parents. But you also have to look at how you deal with other family members. The aunt, the uncle, the niece, the other sibling who you're always arguing with, always fighting with in the presence of the child. How is the child going to act towards those family members? The same way. How is the child going to act towards everybody else outside of that environment? The same exact way. The way we have to begin to put an end to the violence that's happening out in our community is we have to start having more loving, caring, nurturing home environments. It has to begin there. It has to. It begins there. Children are going to make mistakes. You still make mistakes as an adult. You can't stop a child from making a mistake. You can give the child the information, right? You have to learn the difference between punishment and discipline, right? You have to look at a lot of things, and I'll cover some more of those things on Sunday when you join me for Daddy's Right Here, the show that comes on every Sunday at 9 a.m. Right? I'm going to address some more of those things in terms of looking at privileges, how children earn privileges. But most importantly, we have to start looking at if our environments are plagued with yelling and screaming and fighting and arguing all the time, if you're always on the phone with idle chit-chat, gossiping, talking negatively about other people, that creates an environment, right, that's contrary to what the child needs to be nurtured and to grow. To grow. It's important to grow. Right? You need to remove all of that from your household. Right? If you have to have a disagreement between you and somebody else, don't do it around a child. Right? Or if you're going to do it around a child, do it around the child, but show where you're trying to bring resolve to something. And if the other person that you're trying to bring resolve with is not willing, then you need to cut it short. You know what, Aunt Mary, this is not going real well. I don't want to do this in front of my child, right? And maybe we'll talk later. And just escort them to the door. Let them keep on going, yappity, 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 yap. Let them keep on going. But you have to start demonstrating, right, better problem-solving skills to your child. Our children lack problem-solving skills, right? We have so many of our children running to drugs. We have so many more children, right, ending up in a hospital for suicide attempts, right? We have children that are reacting, out in the community violently. And we get labeled as such. Black children have been labeled as being violent. Think about it. You need to start doing some more research on what's happening in our community as opposed to looking at everything that's wrong for us as a people. What's wrong for us as a people really begins in our household.